do this. So, all right, we have everything started. Okay, welcome to episode 29, Mythborn Live. We're going to talk about writing techniques. Sorry, not running techniques, writing techniques. So, I have been on a couple of different radio shows, and I had a really great opportunity last night talking to a woman who runs a show called Your Books. And your life, and it was great because ultimately she asked some questions that really made me think about my technique, and I realized, let's get back to some of the basics that I follow and see if they help any of you aspiring writers out there. I will put the link to the various stuff that I went through in the interview with her in the description below. But that might take a little bit while I find where it all is. And of course, once her radio show is up, I will embed that as an Mythborn Live episode on our site. So you won't miss anything if you didn't catch it last night. Obviously, if I'm telling you that now and you didn't catch it, you missed it, but you're not missing anything. Anyways, so techniques in writing, but first, let's talk about a few housekeeping things. All right, guys, most important, I do not take a side on who you might vote for, but I hope you got out there and voted. We are the only way that the United States of America can be represented. We are the voice. So no matter who it is, please get out there and vote. Get your vote out there. It is so important to be heard. And I hope every one of you had a chance to go out, cast your ballot, and you feel good about what you chose. I know I did, and I'm really, really psyched for you guys too. Okay, number 2. This weekend, I'm going to be at the Barnes & Noble. And I went down and talked to Patrick, their manager. They're starting to do their social media blasts, so you'll probably start seeing things about it. I hope all of you get a chance to come and meet me in person. I will be at the Barnes & Noble on Rockville Pike. I'll be there at 1 p.m. I'll be there for a few hours, probably like 1 to 4. We'll have copies of Mythborn 1, 2, and 3 there for signing. And I hope you guys give it a chance to come and really check it out and enjoy checking out what we've been working on. I think ultimately the great part about getting out there, really in my mind, is not about selling books in the sense that, even if I sold all the books I have, that's not really making the reason for being out at the Barnes & Noble my number one reason. My number one reason is to meet you guys. I love writing, but I love writing because I have readers like you who have bought the book, and I sincerely, sincerely appreciate your support. And so if you get a chance to come out, believe me, it'll be a fun conversation. I'm a relatively open guy, and as you can tell from the videos, I don't seem to be shy about speaking. So, and I would also point out that we will have it should be a really fun day there. The Barnes & Noble has a number of restaurants around it. It has a Starbucks attached to it as usual, and it's got some great stuff. And this Barnes & Noble actually spent a good portion of their floor space on games and card games. I got a copy of Arkham Asylum there, and it's so if you're a role-playing game enthusiast, if you like action figures, if you like all that kind of stuff, then come by, because it's quite a bit of fun there. And if you're someone who knows me and you're local, boy, do I hope you show up. Because I really, it'd be great to see my friends out there, and I look forward to hopefully catching up with each of you as you come by and get a copy of Mythborn signed. Okay, that's I think it for our. Oh, one last thing. I found out today, just by happenstance, that one of the links to our purchase thing had been broken on the Mythborn website, and it had been showing that Mythborn was not available for sale. So listen, if you are out there, if you've been watching Mythborn Live and you wanted to buy a copy, or you wanted to go check out the book, at least check it out, and you were not able to get there, or if you got there, it said Mythborn Live was not for sale. I apologize. There's some thing happened there, and it's typically something got updated, and then somebody didn't tell somebody else how it got updated, or something on the site itself got moved, and so the pointer wasn't pointing to where the book was. The point is it's fixed, and if you are someone who tried before, don't give up. Try again. And I left a link down below that you can click, and you can head right to the Mythborn site on Amazon and check it out. Please do so if you enjoy hearing me, and it helps support us. Finally, please subscribe. I think a subscribe button comes up during the video, probably up here somewhere. Or no, actually probably up over here somewhere. And there certainly will be a subscribe button below. It really helps us when you guys join us. It's a great deal. And so do us a favor and be a subscriber to Mythborn Live. It's for more than anything else, I just enjoy the company and chatting to everybody. So I think really, really great. Okay, let's talk about writing techniques. So what's interesting is the question I get most often is how do you sort of write a novel and get all the characters in line, and how do you figure all that stuff out? And I had a problem when I started writing because I had a lot of characters, if you read Mythborn 1, and I didn't have an effective tool to figure out who should actually meet. That's the problem with writing. The problem I have with writing personally is I could have written about everything. I didn't have a mental filter that told me, oh, you know what, this is more interesting than that. They were all interesting to me. So I had a hard time trying to figure out, should I write about, something relatively mundane but is interesting to me versus something that is full of drama but is interesting to me. And trying to make those decisions ultimately led me to start looking for how other writers did it. And what I was surprised at was just the sort of the lack of institutional knowledge and how to do this. Sorry. So there's not there are writer workshops and people do talk through certain techniques I think that work. But for me specifically in a fantasy writing realm, one of the things I found hard to do was chaining the character streams together in a way that was effective and made sense. And frankly, you can come up with your beginning, middle, and end, sort of the arc of the story, and you can throw in your complications and the rest. But if you don't have the idea of where the best parts of your story are going to happen, it's very difficult to try and set up those moments. So I needed to come up with something that worked for me. And when I figure out how to put an image into this, or I might do post-production, you'll see the creation of a conflict map. So I created something I call in my mind a conflict map. And what the conflict map did was it sorry, dust here. The conflict map, what it did was it allowed me to watch. Well, I wrote down the top 3 sort of moving entities or moving forces within the Mythborn space. And you had sort of the adepts, you had Sovereign, and you had Lilith, and each had their own motivations. And what I try to do is with those 3, that triangle, I then started just putting people on the map. They were just round little stickers that were representative of the characters that I wanted to write about. And then this was sort of how I solved the ability for me to visually see conflict. But what I started doing was drawing colored lines between every character. So between each character, if they knew each other, there would be a line. And if they didn't know each other, but if they met, there would be a relationship there, or a predisposition to a relationship, I drew a certain color line. So I try to make it really easy on myself, right? Red lines meant conflict. Green lines meant, niceness, happiness. Blue lines meant potentially love or something really special. I use some other ones for purple for quest-based people who have to meet if the quest is going to get done. And I had a couple other categories, which I'll put up in the graphic when I get a chance to do that. But ultimately, I'm not saying you should follow my technique exactly. I think if you're writing and you're trying to figure out, how do I do this? Knowing the relationship between any two characters is incredibly, incredibly helpful, because now as you look at your map, you can start seeing like who has the most red lines going to them. They're really not liked by very many people, or they're in conflict with a lot of people. Who has the most green lines? That's a person who excuse me, sorry. That's the person who has the most, potentially the most friends. And so, and also, blue lines gave opportunity for drama. Here's the part that I think was really interesting and emerged out of that I could not have predicted. All right, should have predicted, but I didn't. It wasn't the one-on-one lines that mattered so much, because most of us can tell, because we're social animals, we can tell, oh, this is how this particular social situation is going to unravel or play out when two people meet. What was really interesting to me was the places where triangles formed, where I had three characters who all knew each other, and they had very different line colors between them. What I have come to realize as a writer, I'm not saying that you can't do it any other way, but I realized that conflict is actually the part that like people really, really enjoy having to read about. And the conflict doesn't have to be antagonistic, right? It could be two people trying to figure out how to maneuver through some problem together. You could also have a person trying to meet somebody through somebody and not know that person so well, but their predisposition to that person is negative, and that person has a positive bent to them. The point is that when you have these triangles and they aren't necessarily all one color, that right there is an opportunity to write, and that's an opportunity to have some kind of interesting dynamic happen between those two folks. And I think ultimately that's where you can really start to focus in on the humanity of the people that you're writing. Remember, and this is another part of the conversation I had last night on the radio show that I was on, which, by the way, we'll be broadcasting, again, in case you're joining late. All you missed was a couple of sneezes and me coming up with terms. But what was interesting in the question she asked, the radio interviewer asked me was, what makes the story so addictive to read? And here's the thing, right? I don't personally know what a dragon feels like. I can describe it because I'm a writer, I'm using imagination, but none of us have that sort of actual experience. We have to create some kind of stand-in for that experience. So we might say, oh, it's scaly like a crocodile, or oh, their skin is warm and soft, looks scaly like a snake. So we have to equate it to something that we know in this world. And that one step of removal, that equation to something, that analogy separates us from feeling the intimate actuality of the feeling, the interaction, or the moment. And what I mean by that is, if I haven't directly experienced it, I will have one layer of or more of insulation from that emotion. And that means, as a reader, I am reading about someone. I am not necessarily reading about how I would feel in that situation. I have been abstracted one layer out, because as a writer, the writer now, I had to use an analogy or it felt just like, or, it's a stand-in for something that you couldn't possibly have felt here. So the point is, don't avoid that, right? That is still a good thing. You're going to want to write about dragons and ghosts, and just because you haven't felt a dragon or a ghost doesn't mean you shouldn't embellish in a cool way what you want the reader to feel. But my point is that is going to become part of the dressing of your world or the feeling of your world. It is not necessarily going to work as well from an internalization standpoint when it comes to internalizing how your reader identifies with your character, right? And so the more they identify with your character in any way, the more they're going to enjoy the reading experience, because they're going to connect something about themselves to something that they're reading about. And that's a powerful connection that you as a writer, you want to nurture it. Therefore, my conflict map was because I understood even early on when I wasn't writing as much, and I can't say I was as good as a writer back then, but I understood that I needed something that always allowed me to pick or cherry pick relationships and describing relationships. And here's the thing, all of us know relationships. All of us have been in situations where we broke up with someone, or where we've had a conflict with someone, or we're in love with someone, or we're not in love with someone. The point is that we've had that. That is a one-on-one that I don't have to put a like in there or an analogy in there, because I can, as the writer, speak directly to the reader about something they have actually experienced, even though they live in a world that doesn't have dragons and ghosts. Because human emotion is something we all share at a fundamental level, and we do not need to have, in general, extra things between us and the character to bring those human emotions to life. So here's the thing that I think is really, really important, and that is you need to have, or you need to at least cultivate, a bucket of these kinds of awesome interactions that you can have with your characters and your reader. And the reader needs to have something they can focus on, something that they understand and they believe. And it probably will be something that's fundamental to all human beings. It'll probably be in a relationship or in a moment of weakness or strength or whatever it is, but it will be in a moment of emotional connection. And that emotional connection will portray or create some kind of connection between the reader and the character. So the conflict map is an invaluable tool, in my opinion, for me personally, and I think it'll be valuable for you guys too. It's an invaluable tool to allow you to connect to another human being reading your writing. Because if you understand what's happening from the standpoint of the conflicts that are happening in each scene, you can paint them in a way that pulls your reader into the scene, and they become the evangelist or the evaluationist on what's being said, how it's being said, who's saying it, all that. And if you can do that, man, your job in bringing your world to life has become a lot easier. And I will admit, every day that I write, I get better at it, right? So I'm writing book 4 right now, and there are places in book 4 where it's almost like the characters, they have this, you are sucked into the scene so quickly because the characters are actually dealing with something that isn't, how do I stab this sword into this, mystical creature that is really super powerful. It's never, there are those moments where you get survive, but it's more along the lines of, how do I motivate this guy to stay with the group and not run away scared, right? Or how do I get someone to do what I want them to do without lying, right? And that kind of character, confusion or conundrum, I think that's where you really start to create this relationship between your characters in your book and the people that they're reading about, the people who are reading your book, and how they feel about your characters. So that is one small technique. I will put an example of a conflict map up so you guys can see it. I'll put it as an inset so you can sort of see it while we're talking, and hopefully not take up too much of the screen real estate. But then again, there's not that much on the screen that you really need to see. And I'm looking forward to our next Mythborn Live. I'm going to think about some cool things, and if you guys, again, if this was motivated by someone sending in a quick email saying, "Hey, I want to know more about this thing you said last night on the radio show." So today it became a topic. And you know what? If someone else has something like that as we go along, feel free. Let me know what they are, and I'll be happy to talk about it. Let's go back to our real quick wrap up. I will be at the Barnes & Noble this November 10th from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. I'll have copies of Mythborn 1, 2, and 3. The Barnes & Noble is on Rockville Pike in Rockville, Maryland. If you are local to the Maryland, D.C. area and you want to come out with the kids and meet me, it won't be a trip wasted. There's a lot of great places there, both in terms of fun things to do with the kids, but also great places to eat. And obviously you're in a bookstore, so there'll be a lot of great books to look at. Certainly, I hope you like Mythborn also, but just getting out is really important, I think, on any weekend. And speaking of getting out, get out there and vote. Today's the day. There is no other day to do it. So today's the day. And finally, we really do need your guys' continued support. So please subscribe to our channel and, join us each week. I'm going to be on here Tuesdays and Thursdays for the time being, but as certain things sort of shift around, I might move those days to other days. We talked about this last week, and certainly I'll let everyone know what's happening, so you won't miss the content, but it might shift some days or whatever, and we'll take it from there. Wow, well, here was episode 29. Here's one technique as a writer called conflict maps, and I will follow up next week with more cool information, and I look forward to seeing every single one of you. Thank you so much, and peace.